Hello, everyone. It is Jennie and Laurie of Astropath again today. We're here today to talk about the upcoming Libra lunar eclipse, which is happening on March 25th at 3 a.m., I believe. Is that correct? Okay.
Good.
So before we jump into our conversation about the lunar eclipse, first, thank you for being here. And please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and all those good things that you do. After you've listened to it, please take a moment to leave us a comment as well and ask any questions. Send this to your friends. Please support us in these ways. It's very helpful to us. For Jennie, you can find her at hiddenpathastrology.com. She provides blog posts about all the phases of the moon, the four main phases of the moon that are great. She also does a monthly meditation that you can also find on YouTube now. And she does consultations and teaching, so look her up there. You can find my work at lauriefarrington.com. You can also find me on Patreon, and you can find both of us on different social media platforms. All that information you'll find below as well. Do you have anything particular you want to mention on
No,
top of
it's all just a
this?
work in progress.
Okay.
So, yep.
If you happen to live in Maine, I do have an event happening on the 21st of March. So contact me if you happen to live in Maine and are interested in that. And I think that's everything we need to say before we jump into talking about eclipses. You want to tell us what the heck is an eclipse, Jennie?
Oh boy, we're in eclipse season, folks. Eclipses are always those fun times of year. They happen twice a year. And it's a time when the sun and the moon line up in various ways to kind of occlude each other. So to tell you more about that, we are talking about a lunar eclipse. So a lunar eclipse means that the Earth is between the sun and the moon, and it casts a shadow. The sun casts the shadow of the Earth on the moon. So the moon turns a pretty cool color, like a reddish hue. Sometimes it can be a little purpley. But that's really what we're talking about, a lunar eclipse here. So it always happens on a full moon, because by definition, that's when the sun and the moon are opposite of each other. And an eclipse just happens when they're perfectly lined up where the sun can actually cast a shadow. We are talking about eclipses that are in the Aries Libra axis. So this is a lunar eclipse in Libra. Furthermore, one of the other kind of maybe slightly more geeky astrology considerations is whether or not it's a south node eclipse or a north node eclipse. And we'll show you what those symbols look like on the chart. But essentially, this is a south node lunar eclipse. So it really implies having to deal with something from your past, having to release some sort of issue that's holding you back. It is not something to be freaked out about. I know people like to get all riled up. This is an opportunity to release something that has been holding you back, some kind of baggage or some kind of emotional take, because it's in Libra, it's probably to do with some sort of dependence, some way you rely on people in an unconscious way that actually isn't healthy for you. That's not to say you don't need relationships. We are all interdependent. That is great and normal and wonderful part of being human, to be social beings. This is more looking at what are those edges of those places that just end up holding you back and prevent you from growing into the full independent person that you are. That is represented by the Aries sun end of things here. Now, what is cool about this is there is a solar eclipse, which is a big to-do in the United States because it's going to be a very visible solar eclipse that's going to cut a swath right across the US. That's happening on April 8th. So every time we talk about eclipses, we're talking about a pair. We're talking about a time period that stretches a little longer than your typical moon phase. Not only are we going to want to talk about the 2 weeks between the two eclipses, the lunar eclipse on the 25th of March and then the solar eclipse on the 8th of April, But we're also thinking about the longer term, the 6-month cycle. There'll be further eclipses down the road. But anyway, that's just a quick little piece. What did I miss, Lori?
Well, the only thing I want to throw out there is just this funny little information about the difference of the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse, you know, in antiquity, how it was thought about. I just think that it's so interesting that solar eclipses back in the day were always, you know, there was a lot of fear attached. And you can imagine if you lived hundreds of years ago and didn't know what was happening, if all of a sudden for a solar eclipse in the middle of the day, the sun goes dark. You know, how scary is that? All of a sudden, the birds start singing and the stars come out. That's pretty scary if you don't know what's happening. And also for a lunar eclipse, if you happen to be out under the full moon and all of a sudden the moon disappears, turns orange and disappears, that's pretty scary. So back in those ancient times, how these were looked at was that the solar eclipse was thought of as something horrible was going to happen to the leader, to the, you know, the king was going to die, or, you know, something horrible was going to happen in that manner. And with the lunar eclipses, it was thought of as something happening to the populace, the people. A pestilence was going to come, or a famine, or something along those lines. So there was a lot of fear attached to these things. And, you know, clearly today we have an awareness of what it is and why it happens. And yet people still attach a lot of fear to these things. And, you know, they are powerful turning points. They're pivot points in our lives and in the culture around us. And, you know, so some of this stuff is still kind of linked in our understanding here. One of the things about this particular lunar eclipse we'll talk about when we look at the chart is that I don't think we're going to have to worry. I don't think we're going to have to worry about pestilence or famine, although the world does seem to be having some crazy things going on. But there's some really positive pieces involved in this lunar eclipse that I think can really support us in looking at it in a really positive manner. So I wanted to bring in a little fear and then let you know you don't have to be scared.
Yeah, no, it's good. I like bringing that story into it. And also, I'm just thinking, you know, some of the keywords for a South Node lunar eclipse, you know, this big thing. I mean, one of the keywords is certainly going to be releasing. And I think of the word shedding, like having to shed
Mm.
skins, you know, and if you think about, you know, what comes to mind is just like how snakes shed their skins. And when you know, they get to this point where that skin is just not, it's too tight, it's too small, it needs to be allowed to kind of die off, you
Mm.
know, and then it can become this like shiny new snake again. So there is this kind of element of rebirth to an eclipse, like where you can shed skins so that you can evolve in the way that you need to move forwards. And that's really what this represents. So in a lot of ways, and you brought up that great keyword of pivot, you know, wherever you have the eclipse cycles is representing where pivots are happening in your life, you know, and each of you, I hope that you do have some familiarity with your own chart, or you have a printout, or you're going to contact one of us to get a consultation, because it's so helpful to know where those pivot points are going to be happening in your life. And what you need to know is, do you have any sensitive points? In this case, around 5 degrees of cardinal. So that's going to be 5 degrees of Libra, Capricorn, Aries, or Cancer. Those are going to be crucial points that are going to help you understand, is this eclipse cycle really big one for me personally? Or is it, it's not such a big theme, but the next one might be. So that's the crucial piece of information. The pivots, whether they're tiny because it's not impacting something major in your life, or much bigger because it's, wow, landing on that major T-square you have in your chart or whatever. That's something that's really, really important to think about. But growth is the natural way of things, you know, to evolve as a human, to evolve your consciousness. And these eclipses really give us a framework, you know, to look at the sort of like 6-month increments of our growth. So this is I mean, I think they're exciting, and there is too much fear in the world right now anyway. And We are not here to fearmonger at all, but rather the opposite, to encourage you, to show you where these avenues for growth really lie in your own chart and through the wonderful lens of astrology. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do we want to look at the dates now or after we open the chart? I can't remember how we.
Oh, doesn't matter. But we should, yeah, let's definitely talk dates.
Yeah, before we go on to
Yeah.
dates, let me just say, I'm really glad you brought up the 5 degrees, so because this is happening at 5 degrees. So, like Jenny said, pay attention to anything at 5 degrees of any of those cardinal signs. Give yourself a maximum of 2 degrees orb for that. If you've got something 2 degrees before 5 or 2 degrees after, then you can, you can assume that this is going to be more powerful for you personally, but we want to keep that orb pretty tight for this. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Great.
dates, how about it?
So this one happening March 25th, we already mentioned that. And let's see, the new moon, that the 2 weeks ago the new moon in Pisces happened on March 10th, at 20 degrees of Pisces. So that's just the little 2 week cycle of our monthly moon phases. So 2 weeks ago, we planted a seed for some sort of something to do with our dreams, or or to alleviate suffering, something like that. And then this is the lunar eclipse based on that. Um, the bigger cycle, we had a solar eclipse in Libra on October 14th, 2023. And I distinctly remember Laurie and I having lots of discussions around healing and dealing with your dependence issues and relationships and so on. So you can think back to that October 14th time for the longer eclipse cycles that we mentioned a few minutes ago. So those are two of the key dates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's all we need before we open the chart. The rest of it we'll cover when we have the chart open. Yes.
Because we will talk about the 2 week period
Yeah.
between these two eclipses, and we'll do that in the course of the next little
Okay,
conversation piece.
so let's open up the chart itself and take a look at what we've got going on here. So here's the chart, and this is at the moon is at 5 degrees Libra. I did make a mistake here. It's Eastern Daylight Time, not Eastern Standard Time, but it is 3 a.m. on March 25th, the exact moment of that eclipse.
Mhm. Yeah, so this is quite an interesting chart. I mean, I think the main thing that has our attention, let's just start from the top. You've got the sun opposing the moon, as mentioned, both at 5 degrees, the sun at 5 Aries, the moon at 5 Libra. But I also want you to just take a look at that nodal axis. The nodal axis is actually at 15 degrees, so it's 10 degrees out. I just want to mention that because that's how you know when you look at a chart and you're like, geez, where are the eclipses? That's how you know you're near an eclipse, because that nodal axis is so close to the sun and moon. And that's going to be the case in your own natal chart, or any chart you look at, you can tell right away. So, I mean, 10 degrees out, that's this is a partial eclipse. At least, well, I guess it partly depends where you're located on the earth. But anyway, just want you to know that's the node, the one that looks kind of like a yeah, that one. It kind of looks like a nose ring.
I think of it as an upside down horseshoe.
Yeah, that's a great, so that's the south node. So the south node is it's a U shape, and it's next to the moon. And that is the south node. Really, it has a lot of different meanings in astrology, but in a nutshell, it represents the past in some way, like something that you've, carried from the past into this lifetime with you in a natal chart. But so for that reasons, Laurie and I are really talking about having to kind of look at what is maybe some baggage of the past, some way that you've been trained, or you've been, taught, or you've, being told that you're supposed to behave a certain way, is going to be all things represented by that south node.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really interesting in this chart, just visually when you look at it, is how everything's at the bottom of the chart except that moon up there and the south node. It's like it just really I guess it's the handle of the bucket shape if you think of charts that way, and it just really heightens the importance of this, I think. And the thing that really strikes me is when we look at an eclipse like this, we want to pay a lot of attention to the ruler of the moon here, the ruler of the eclipse. So we've got the moon in Libra, and we know that Venus rules Libra. So we want to pay attention to what's going on with Venus. That's going to give us a lot of information about the challenges involved in this eclipse, or the gifts that are provided within this eclipse. And Venus in Pisces it's in its exaltation. Venus loves to be in Pisces. The other thing that's really beautiful here is that Venus is making a delightful little sextile to Jupiter, which is in Venus's sign. Venus is in Jupiter's sign. So they are in a mutual reception. They're in a positive aspect. They're in each other's sign. Well, that's what being in mutual reception means. But they're both very, very happy where they are and in their interaction. And that really supports the work of releasing this old baggage that needs to be released. The other thing about Venus that is really lovely here is it has just passed over Saturn. So it's feeling really stable. It's not only like, developing this opportunity with Jupiter, but it's in not only in its exaltation, but also it's just taken on this stability. I think that's so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, that's a really nice support, and part of the reason we're saying this is an opportunity to release something that is not, working for you, that in a lot of ways is occluding. I was just thinking, it's just like occluding your beauty in some way, because that, Venus as a planet is very much concerned with your values, pleasure, beauty, harmony. I mean, these are things that it's about, and Venus in Pisces is just it. I mean, it loves, as Laurie mentioned, being in Pisces because Venus loves the ideal and the transcendent that Pisces brings in. And
Mhm.
also, what's so cool about that is it just means that Venus is in a very powerful position. Like as Lori, you were just saying, Venus is so powerful, and it's more powerful in this chart than either Mars or Saturn, which are traditionally considered the kind of the malefics, the like planets that can be a bit rough, And in this case, Mars is in charge of all of that Aries stuff, and Mars is in Pisces. Like, and Mars is not necessarily very happy in Pisces. But what's cool about it is it kind of brings in those Pisces traits, like the idea of having to be empathetic, to be compassionate, to recognize the suffering, and to be able to hold that and be supportive of that. And Venus is more strongly placed than that Mars planet, and it also is more strongly placed than Saturn, which similarly is not a traditionally not a big fan of hanging out in Pisces. It wants much more concrete things. So, Venus is kind of saying, "Hey, I'm in a good place here," and really harvesting the idea of stability and structure from Saturn, from its recent contact with Saturn, as you mentioned. So
Yeah,
it's really good. It's
it
a good.
really is. And, if you work with dispositorships at all and you look at this chart, everything in the chart is answering to Venus and Jupiter. Everything. Everything, that little mutual reception holds, everybody else has to answer to those two. So they are really in control of the whole narrative here. And that's a beautiful thing. And the other thing that Jennie and I wanted to bring up here, we did a video a while back about Pluto's movement into Aquarius, and we all collectively and personally are going through such a huge transformation wherever Pluto has moved in our own chart. And that also, that change that's happening in our lives, that change that's happening in the culture, is also in a really positive relationship to this eclipse. That Pluto is sextiling the sun and trining that eclipse, that Libra full moon.
Mm.
So there's so much support for this. And if we want to think about this lunar eclipse as being about the populace, the people, rather than the king, we can see that the people are being supported in this particular eclipse in a really powerful way.
Yeah, and that I really, yeah, this is great bringing in Pluto like that, Lori. I really think that's an important piece. And I also want to mention too I love you're bringing the antiquity and the idea of the moon being the people. In a more modern psychological sense, the moon refers to your emotional profile, your emotional being. And so I definitely like to think of this is part of your emotional healing. And one of the helpful things about Pluto being in the mix in Aquarius, trining the moon in Libra, is that it's bringing the more positive traits of the air sign forward. And the more positive traits of the air sign are spaciousness, the ability to be more objective. So as you do some emotional healing around whatever needs to be released, you have this ability to tap the objectivity, which is really helpful when you're dealing with intense emotional content. It gives you this little slice of a pause or a lens so that you can see things in a more helpful manner. So that is something that we're going to include to some degree in the impacts of just using that energy in that way. Very helpful for emotional work. So and since we're in a lunar eclipse, this is definitely what we're working on. Each of our own internal emotional things that we need to work to heal, and that's where we're at. So
It's beautiful. I think it's a very powerful and very positive eclipse. So I'm excited about it. It gives me hope.
me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
The last thing we want to mention too is that this is the first part of an eclipse cycle. The second one is happening on
Oh,
April
yes.
8th. We
Yes.
have a solar eclipse in Aries, and that very powerful eclipse is kind of sets up this 2-week window where here we have the full moon, and then the moon's going to start waning after that eclipse. It's going to wane and then go into the balsamic moon phase until we have the new moon at the solar eclipse on April 8th. So we really want to encourage you to take these 2 weeks and really think about this material and think about what is it that you wish to release, and then use these 2 weeks in a conscious manner. And part of this 2-week period we have on April 1st, which is bang in the middle, we have the last quarter moon, which is going to be in Capricorn. And the same day as that, which is also April Fool's Day, we have Mercury turning retrograde at 27 degrees of Aries. So this kind of keeps this theme going, for these 2 weeks for your consideration and to think about that as a longer process.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's really important when we think about these things and when we think about how it impacts our own personal charts and our own personal lives, we may feel like, oh, yeah, it's time for me to let go of this, to release this. I'm going to take action and, kick it out the door today. We want to really slow down. This period of time between the eclipses is not a time to take any drastic action. You don't want to take any big action during this 2-week period of time. And you actually, with that Mercury going retrograde there on the 1st, you want to wait and take whatever actions you're developing an understanding of after Mercury has gone direct or even after it's out of its shadow. So yeah, be careful. Don't take any immediate actions. Just do your internal work on these things during this time.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, I just want to, I feel like we should just take a quick minute here to spend a little bit of time on the Aries configuration here, because we focus very much on the Libra and the lunar eclipse, but I just want to mention a big theme has been Chiron conjunct the North Node, and those two being together. And then now you have Mercury joining, or in this chart, it's already gone past those two, but it's going to retrograde back over both of those. And I just think, yeah, maybe not over the North Node, but anyway, the point is you have this big Aries question, and I have just been really thinking of this in terms of all of us having to look at our use of force, look at our use of aggressive energy, and ask ourselves what the best use is. I mean, Aries is all about charge ahead, move quickly, don't worry about anything, don't worry about consequences. And right now, everything about Aries is saying, oh no, you need to think about the consequences. You need to be aware of what your use of energy, if it's not in right alignment, like what kind of destruction you are capable of and how it can be counter to healing. So there's a big question mark, and we are in Aries season. So this lunar eclipse is very much making a statement about healing that, for maybe lack of a better description, the masculine energy that each and every one of us contains. It has nothing to do with what sex you are, but just that energy that we use externally is in question here. So
Yeah.
need to throw that in.
It, it's very interesting, isn't it? Needing to release something in the Libra arena, needing to release some way of being overly dependent, and yet pausing before you take that immediate dramatic action. Just because you're releasing your dependency doesn't mean you have to blow up the barn. Doesn't mean you have to, go to the opposite extreme of it's all about me. Finding that, I think that 2 week period is such a time of finding that balance. Where am I releasing? Where am I taking on my own courage in a healthy manner, not in a blast somebody over the head manner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the reality is, it's like it is
Fascinating.
about that. Can you include, these other relationship considerations? Every action you take impacts other people, and that's really what's being brought forward here, is to really reflect deeply on the Libra end of how you are in a relationship, how you stand in relationship, and the choices that you make, and then how your independent autonomous action actually helps others as well, is actually moving towards the whole storyline. It isn't just about your own self and your own ego. And so that it's really lovely to have this opportunity to think about this, because I don't think just wanting to be selfish is ultimately where any of us really wants to be if we were coming from a healed, balanced place.
Right.
So it's interesting.
But we do want to develop the audacity of Aries.
Yes. Good. You brought that keyword in. Excellent.
I just love that. I don't remember. I heard somebody use the word audacity for Aries recently, and it just stuck with me. Like, that's the great gift of Aries, is the ability to be audacious. Yeah, and you don't need to knock anybody over the head to do that. So, are we where are we at now? Are we ready to move into the individual pieces?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've
Okay.
covered a pretty good amount of the topics. So
Okay, so now we're going to talk about those of you who have Aries rising. If you've got Aries rising, wow, this lunar eclipse is happening right in your seventh house of your closest, most intimate partnerships. This can be your marriage partner, your romantic partner, your business partner, your very best friends, anybody that that seventh house tends to be contractual relationships. Um, at any rate, what this is providing us with the opportunity is to think about, how do you kind of give yourself away in relationships? How are you dependent on someone else's idea of what the relationship may look like? What you want to be careful of is, yeah, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not about releasing your partner. I mean, it may be, but it's more likely to be releasing your dependency on somebody else's idea of what relationship should mean to you. Because the South Node is there, because this is a South Node eclipse, you want to think in terms of what are your old expectations? What are the expectations you were raised to believe a relationship was supposed to mean to you? And how is that working or not working for you now? You want to think, where am I on uneven terrain in my relationship? Where am I allowing somebody else to paint the picture of what relationship means to me. Where do I need to release that idea in order to be true to my authentic, audacious self, right? So if you just think about it that way, it's really, this is pretty simple for those of you with Aries rising. Now, to bring in the Pluto is interesting because Pluto, we wanted to bring in Pluto into these individual impacts because it's offering a gift. It's just recently moved into Aquarius. So for you with Aries rising, this has brought this incredibly powerful, transformative change into the area of your community. The folks, the kind of like-minded people that support you. There's some big change happening, occurring in that area. And you can really look to the folks in your community, the folks that support you, to support your new understanding of what you need to release around your own expectations of relationship. You can look to your community to support you in becoming your most audacious self.
Nice.
I think it's as simple as that. What do you think, Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, it's, with the Aries rising, you are talking about the first and the seventh house, which by definition is self and other. And that it is, it's a tennis match of self and other, And I think you brought some really great ways to think about this. I would just maybe, I don't even know if it's add, but emphasize the idea that the question is not whether or not your partner is the right partner for you. That's not the question. The question is more like, how are you showing up in partnership, and how is the way that you're showing up based on, I'm sure it's probably your upbringing, whatever your past, as Laurie said, the past instruction you've received about a marriage is blah blah blah, or a one-on-one partnership fits into these categories. That's the area that needs to be changed, that needs to be released. And again, as Laurie said, that could mean that you need a change in partnership, and it does need to shift. But if that's the case, it's going to be after the opportunity to really do some deep thinking and ruminating on your own about these other topics. And from that balanced place, you would make such a decision. But also, my thought is but that may lead you to a place where it doesn't end up having that much to do with your partner, but it has more to do with these old patterns of past, that you've shown up with these expectations. And I mean, expectations is a key word for relationships. If you're showing up with a whole set of expectations that you're not even aware of, I mean, that's going to be the thing that's actually holding you back, not whoever the partner is themselves. And that's the clearing that you need to do. And just as Laurie says, to step into that Aries self, which is part of your destiny as an Aries rising person. You are here to show others how to use that leadership and that determination, and, as you say, the audacity of the Aries. And the key player of Pluto here, Pluto is helping you get information, because Pluto is in Aquarius with the moon in Libra. So you're getting information about, from your community, about how to be in this partnership space, and so those are tied together. And just, it is an opportunity for empowerment, to empower you in both ways, where you can be empowered to be the partner you would like to be, and also be standing in your community in the way that really helps you feel empowered. And I mean, this whole picture is about being empowered in your relationships.
Yeah, I think as you're talking about it, I just imagine somebody with a newfound connection with community, a new like community just opens up their eyes to their old patterns of relating.
Yeah.
There's so much of that can happen. That's really lovely. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Taurus rising.
Okay, so those of you with Taurus rising, this lunar eclipse is falling in your sixth house. The polarity between the sun and the moon is lighting up the polarity between your sixth and your 12th houses. Let's start with just the idea here that both of these places are about some kind of learning. some kind of a willingness to shift and change what you're doing here. So with the lunar eclipse falling in the sixth house, this is bringing in the whole question of how you take care of yourself. And that means on a kind of a physical level, like how do you eat? How do you sleep? How do you exercise? Are you meditating? Do you want to incorporate something like that? So those are all those practices, those things that you do day in and day out that ultimately kind of make up the substance of your life. I mean, that's ultimately what the sixth house is. And so you're getting this wonderful opportunity to just kind of question that and question what are the belief patterns you have that have led you to be living a certain way in your life? And what do you now need to release and clear so that you can bring more balance to whatever your body needs, like to whatever habits that you need that are going to help support your health. I mean, that's ultimately what is, the core question of the lunar eclipse. In the meantime, we are in Aries season. We are looking at an Aries eclipse coming up, in a couple weeks. So you also want to think about how are these routines helping you step into a new way of being determined, of being independent, that it has been kind of elusive for you. Having Aries in the 12th house, it's hard to get at. It's sort of like you have to go swimming down deep to unearth your sense of self, because your sense of self is kind of suspended in this like collective picture. So it's hard to get at that Aries piece. But we can think about the 12th house as being your subconscious patterns. So as you shift your practices from the lunar eclipse, it's going to help you understand where you can step more fully into yourself in that 12th house.
Mm.
In the meantime, one other player here that Laurie and I brought in, which is Pluto. Pluto is in a lovely trine to the moon and a
Whoops.
sextile to
Oh,
the sun. That's right. So in what Pluto's doing here is Pluto has recently moved into your 10th house of your public reputation and your career. So what you have is Pluto, some kind of change in your profession or your public reputation that is now supporting this change, that is helping you see what you need to do that's going to be better for your overall physical and mental health across the board. So I mean, that's kind of in a nutshell. Yeah.
yeah. I love thinking about just the back to the moon there in the sixth house, thinking about that sixth house as all those things that you talked about, all of that stuff being wrapped up sort of in the word lifestyle, all those ways of managing your life. And you think about dependency here, releasing someone else's, it could show up in different ways. It can show up as you're living these patterns of your lifestyle in reaction or response to a partner or somebody else's idea of the way it should be, and needing to release that. It could also, because it's the south node, be a very old pattern that you just picked up, an internal dependency on this being an area where you do things a certain way. So just really releasing that. And you can imagine for somebody with Taurus rising, with Pluto going into that 10th house, there's probably been a huge shift in your career that is insisting that you make changes in that area of your day-to-day routine, your lifestyle. When our careers take a huge step forward, our patterns of behavior can't stay the same. So this really supports that change. And again, we want to remind everybody in the weeks between these two eclipses, you don't want to take any fast action. You don't want to say, oh, well, I'm going to give up all my patterns of behavior. I'm going to give up my meditation practice and my exercise and, whatever. You don't want to dive into taking any fast actions. You actually want to wait until after Mercury goes direct, which I can't remember right now what the date is of that.
I think it's April 25th.
Okay. So wait until Mercury goes direct before taking action on the changes that you are currently seeing and understanding and internally exploring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think, just quick in a nutshell, it's just almost like this. I could see two ways of looking at this. One, the sixth and the 10th house, where the moon and Pluto are, both of those have to do with your livelihood. Both of those have to do with you, in sort of a material way, dealing with your livelihood. So on one hand, there's that change, Pluto moving to 10th house, just as you mentioned, Lori, and forcing you to change your schedule, of the sixth house. The other piece, just simply, is you may be distracted by something crazy, cool going on in your career, but you need to take care of your health. And that's kind of what this is saying, is don't forget to just take the steps you need to do to settle down a little bit and take care of your physical and mental health. So,
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on now to folks who have Gemini rising. So this highlights the polarity between the 5th house and the 11th house. Those of you with Gemini rising, this eclipse is happening in your 5th house. So the 5th house, we can think of that area as it's really where we give of ourselves most truly and authentically. It's where we give of ourselves. I guess it's as simple as that. The old time astrologers talked about it as the house of children, creativity, love affairs. So you think with Libra here, you are releasing some dependency in the manner in which you give of yourself, the manner in which you show your creative self. This may be a pattern. It's probably a very old pattern. It may be attached to your relationships in current time or your relationships long ago, but there's some way in which your creative expression depends on you pleasing others, or has depended on you pleasing others. And you really want to work to really recognize that. What is it within your ability to give love that is attached to pleasing others? You want to release that dependency and find a way to do that more authentically for yourself. There's a lot of learning that comes in this consideration. There's a lot of learning that comes from the 11th house, from your community. You can think of this polarity, like I talked about, the 5th house is where you give love. The 11th house is where you receive support from the larger collective, from your community. So you really want to release some dependency and allow there to be more growth of your audacity. I'm going to use that word repeatedly now that I've got hold of it. You want to, bring audacity and leadership to your community, and that will help you understand and see where you have that dependency around your creativity and release it. The other piece is that Pluto has recently moved into your 9th house. So there's a big change, a big shift, a big empowerment of understanding bigger worldview pictures. This could come through travel or through education, but there's some way that you're really learning a bigger understanding of the outside world that is really just poised to empower your creativity to be released or untangled from that dependency. So really finding that connection, maybe it's as simple as, I don't know, if your creativity is, an artistic creativity, as an example, and creativity can look a million different ways. But whatever your creativity is, maybe this is, you're learning something new. You've taken on a new study, or you just picked up a new book and it's teaching you something different about how to give of yourself, and really allowing that new learning to support this process.
nice. Yeah, I think it's interesting here, just that fifth and that 11th house polarity. I mean, I just think about, the fifth house it's one of the houses that is tied in with your sense of self.
Mm.
It's one of the houses, it's the house of self-expression. So it really comes from you kind of knowing yourself and then knowing what gifts you have to offer and how you want to share of yourself. And what this implies is, as you've been saying, Lori, I mean, this definitely implies that you receive some instruction about a specific way you're supposed to give of yourself. And depending what your upbringing was and your culture that you were raised in, there's some sense that you've been told that you have to give yourself away completely, or lose yourself in some way as you give love. And so you now have this opportunity. This lunar eclipse really gives you an opportunity to kind of suss that out and be like, wait a minute, how do I want to give of myself? This is an extension of my own sense of self. This is a creative gift I have, and I want to be giving this gift. And it gives you an opportunity to have a more stable platform, a more balance about how you give that of yourself without completely giving yourself away, but offering this beautiful gift to the world, the people around you. So you really gotta it's really an uncovering process, like clearing stuff away so that you can really just be in this more balanced self. And I think from that process you're going to find you just are a natural leader in groups. That's what the Aries represents, that you just have this ability to be naturally courageous and show people the way in terms of autonomous direction. Yeah, and I love the Pluto in the mix is great, just really supporting that, like supporting your overall wisdom. That ninth house also is the other house that is to do with your sense of self and how you express yourself. So that's where you really have your own authentic philosophy. And
Mm.
as you allow Pluto to empower that, it's going to help you understand how you want to share that gift that you have where the lunar eclipse is. So it's a really nice combination. And Lori and I really encourage you in these 2 weeks between the two eclipses,
Mm.
between March 25th and April 8th, to just work with this process. Think in terms of like, what gifts am I giving and what would I like to release and clear away so that this part of me can really shine like the jewel that it is.
Mm.
That's really the question in these 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, and beyond, but just really using these 2 weeks to do that deep internal process in relationship with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
without taking drastic action,
mhm.
just sitting in it, working with it as your own internal process. Any actions that need to be taken will have to wait until after Mercury goes direct. So just do your inner work on it. That's the key here.
Nice.
Okay,
Okay.
so let's move on to those of you with Cancer rising.
All right. So those of you with Cancer rising, this lunar eclipse is falling in the two houses that have to do with your foundation and your public reputation. These are powerful houses. The fourth and the 10th house are very powerful houses. So the fourth house, where this lunar eclipse is happening, really refers to your foundation, your home. So your home life, your physical house, your family of origin that you were raised in, further back into your ancestry and lineage. And furthermore, it might even have to do with the land that you live on now, the physical land. So those are all meanings that have to do with the fourth house. Because we're in a south node lunar eclipse, I'm going to propose that this is a very internal process, and that what you really at the most fundamental level, what you're really managing and working with is your own emotional foundation
Mm.
at the base of your personality, the things that have led you to be who you are right now. So you have this opportunity during this lunar eclipse to really examine that, to examine that place of your origin. Like, what are the subconscious patterns that you have been handed just because of your upbringing, that you now have this opportunity to look at objectively and release some of the patterns that are really not helpful to you, and that you're going to emerge from that with this much more stable, secure internal emotional foundation, which is going to allow you to really take full advantage of what is happening in Aries right now.
Mm.
So Aries is lighting up your 10th house, your public reputation, your profession. And so as you get more secure in your foundation, it's going to allow you to step forwards to be determined, autonomous, to be the leader that you potentially could be in your chosen profession.
Mm.
And so that's what you're doing is you're clearing out the kind of basement, you're clearing out the foundation so that what you put on that foundation can be just powerful, potent, really moving forwards into a potency in your professional life.
Mm.
And fortunately, you also have Pluto supporting this process. Pluto has recently entered your 8th house. It's in Aquarius. So Pluto is sort of saying to you, hey, you know what? You just need to learn how to set these boundaries here and just draw these lines here so that you can empower yourself through this process. And do remember, boundaries are an art. They are not there's not hard and fast rules about boundaries. They are quite changeable. And so you're learning more about how to transform yourself through the art of the right boundaries in your relationships. The other thing I really like about this is because Pluto's in Aquarius and the moon is in Libra, you can really take advantage of the air, the objectivity of air, the spaciousness that the element of air that both these signs are in can give you, because it lets you see people for who they are. I think in my own personal case, I'm thinking a lot about my family of origin with this pictures, and I have Cancer rising. And I'm thinking about being able to see my family members as human beings instead of as my parent or my spouse or it's no, they're their own individual autonomous human being, and they have done whatever they've done to be where they are. And that objectivity has helped me tremendously with these issues. And as I work towards being that Aries person in my astrology business. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it. And I think that it's been really helpful to see this. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I can add a darn thing to what you've said because you covered this really beautifully. And I love how you brought in just the objectivity that these air signs with Pluto and the moon in air signs. And really, I think that's such an important thing for us to learn and understand is that the people in our lives are individuals. And I think that's so much, for myself, that's been such, the core understanding that astrology has brought me is really understanding people as individuals that have lives totally apart from anything I can even imagine, and really, yeah, separating them from the role that they play in our own individual lives. And this is such a beautiful opportunity for those of you with Cancer rising to really tap into the importance of intellectually understanding the boundaries and setting them and allowing them to support letting go of those old stories of what home and family is supposed to be for you and allowing yourself to be supported into that incredibly audacious astrologer that you're becoming or that you are. But
Thanks,
this
Laurie.
just really pushes you in that. This really allows you to push yourself in that direction and to let go of some of those old stories of what it means to be a daughter, what it means to be in the particular role you're in with your family members. I think that's really beautiful. It's really lovely.
And just one further note that we're trying to out of these two, with anyone with Cancer rising, take advantage of these next 2 weeks because you've got this 2-week window between these eclipses. This is the time to do this deep internal work, whether that means for you journaling, meditating, meeting with a therapist, whatever it is. Do the inner work because the foundation that you set at this time is enduring and can last a long time. So take these 2 weeks, and then when we get to the eclipse, the solar eclipse on April 8th, we'll be ready, and we'll make a video about that, but you'll be ready to take advantage of that Aries piece of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's easy for people sometimes to think about, oh, it's a south node lunar eclipse. We've got to get rid of something, and it is about releasing dependency, but so much of it is it's our own. It's not like, okay, this is happening in your fourth house, so kick everybody out of your house. That's not the point. It's
Yeah.
your own dependency on the storyline that you have in that area. It's not about kicking your family out or
Yeah, it's about
anything.
how you relate. And so that's your end of it. How you relate to others is your end.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's good.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on now to those who have Leo rising. If you've got Leo rising, this is really highlighting the polarity between your third house and your ninth house. These two houses are so much related to learning, education, understanding the world. The eclipse itself is happening there in the third house. The third house is really, I think about the third house as our immediate environment in a lot of ways. It's the immediacy of how we communicate with the people around us. It's our voice, how we use our voice, how we understand what needs to be said. As far as the people who populate that house, we would think about siblings, neighbors, cousins, maybe, the people that you interact with, the people that are not really chosen in your life, but people that are part of your immediate environment. So what you want to think about here with the South Node lunar eclipse is you're releasing something in this area. And again, like I talked about in the one about Cancer arising, it's not about, okay, I'm going to kick my siblings to the curb, or I'm going to, whatever, blow up my neighborhood. It's not about getting rid of anything. It's about releasing um, your own past beliefs about what this area is supposed to look like. It may be, you're releasing a dependency. It may be a dependency on a particular relationship that keeps you in this particular environmental place. Whatever it is, it's an old storyline that you think you need to be polite with your siblings or your neighbors. I don't know. Whatever it is, there's something there that needs to be released. You know what it is. If you've got Leo rising, you know what it is because it's something that's feeling uncomfortable in this area. So you need to think about that. And in that piece of work, you're going to be developing a greater understanding of your own individual um, your own individual worldview. With that Aries up there in the ninth house, you again, I'm going to say the word audacious. You can release these dependencies on someone else telling you what to talk about or think about in order to really find your own worldview, your own understanding of that. Now, at the same time, we've got Pluto over here in the seventh house. There's big changes happening in how you relate to the closest people in your environment. And the changes that are happening in that relationship are a big part of the support of being able to release the dependency um, in your immediate environment. There's something very supportive of maybe a new relationship or a new way of looking at relationship that is really supporting this process. What do you
Nice.
have, Jenny?
Let's see. Well, it's interesting with I was thinking about the juxtaposition of, having Libra in your third house and having this solar eclipse. I'm sorry, this lunar eclipse in this with the South Node highlighting that. And it just there's something about, I mean, I think, Laura, you kind of said it, but just there's a place in which you kind of maybe tend towards trying to ingratiate yourself with other people, or where you're trying to please through the way you use your voice, and that's a natural thing. If you think about using your voice as a baby, a brand new baby in a household, you're trying to scream to get your parents' attention. So it's natural. It's a natural origin, but now, you're in a different place in your life. And so you really have this opportunity to look at how you communicate and peek in on some of the unconscious motivations before you kind of start opening your mouth and speaking, because that's really what this is allowing you to do, is kind of question those things that I just think of eclipses, it's got this reddish hue to it, so it allows you to see yourself in a new light. That's what it symbolizes,
Mm.
the lunar eclipse. It's symbolizing this ability to see a new perspective about yourself that you haven't been able to. And because it's in the third house, it's like, and then the ninth too. I mean, both of those are so much about perspective,
Mm.
so you really are getting this great opportunity to kind of take a step back. And I mean, like, one example would be to have how to use this would be to experiment with silence, for maybe a day or two in between the two eclipses. It's just one example, but where you could kind of get a look at your patterns of how, when you feel motivated to speak and why. I mean, even if you just did it for a couple of hours, you could really learn some interesting information about what's going on there. But like Laurie said, as a
Mm.
Leo rising person, whatever the thing is that's going on, the communication struggle or the problem with your sibling or the cousin or whatever, or some way that you need to speak up in your environment. I'm sorry, in your neighborhood. I mean, you know what that issue is. So you can kind of figure that out. But that's what you want to think about in these 2 weeks between, is like, how, what patterns do you need to release? And then you'll be able to just step into this. I can think of a person with this, but step into this place of powerful wisdom that the Aries in the ninth house represents,
Mm.
where you have the opportunity to kind of, influence or affect people on a bigger level, but only because of this deep work you've done on how you use your voice. So when you do step forwards into that Aries space, when you're ready, you're going to come from this place of being inclusive, having objectivity, having the desire to, share beauty, harmony, all those kind of Venus topics that the Libra brings in there. So pretty cool. And yeah, and I really like the idea of that Pluto kind of influencing your, those one-on-one connections, helping you see the way, helping you see how to use your voice, how to share your wisdom. You know,
Yeah, I think about this as the profound change happening in your relationship is really pushing you to understand how much your voice has been silenced by trying to be diplomatic.
yeah.
I'm quite frankly thinking of someone specific, but the idea that there's some way in which your voice has been um, used overly diplomatically. And,
Mhm.
having the ability to be diplomatic with your voice is a great gift. But at this point in time, we are looking at the old patterns that taught us a certain way that we had to be overly diplomatic with our voice.
And that brings up a question for me too, Lori, like a key question for you to ponder, those of you Leo rising, is what is the cost of being overly diplomatic? What have you found yourself being forced to sacrifice
Yeah.
because of being overly diplomatic? And how can you use this time to shed that pattern and transcend that tendency of kind of sacrificing too much of yourself in
Yeah.
the way that you speak? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and something in that relationship really highlights the need to do that and the ability to do that. That's really beautiful. Okay,
Good.
let's move
Okay.
let's move on to folks with Virgo rising.
Alrighty, so Virgo rising, this lunar eclipse is falling in your second house, which means that the whole thing, the whole full moon lunar eclipse is falling across your second and your eighth house. So both of these houses have to do with your worth and your resources. Let's focus on the second house first. The second house is a lot about how you on a deep level value yourself, how you recognize your own self-worth, and you recognize the resources you have for others. So that's where the focus is. The second house has to do with resources on all levels. So this means, whatever storyline you've ingested about what your own value is, and then what your values are, like what other things you value outside of yourself. And then money. I mean, money is a huge topic for the second house, and money, really, our relationship to money has a lot to say about our value system. I mean, and that's just we live in this capitalist society. Money kind of brings in all kinds of different things about how you look at yourself. So there is a money piece in here too. So those are some of the topics that this lunar eclipse are going to bring up. And you have this opportunity, and it really is a beautiful opportunity to release some of those old ideas, those things that you unconsciously just absorb, probably from your upbringing, probably from different experiences in your life, where you've absorbed this certain, ethos around what money's worth or what you're worth. And now you get this opportunity to see something a little bit different and change that story, and, be able to kind of, get deeper into your true worth and what you have to offer others. And as you do that, it's going to allow you to really work with the Aries energy here. And what the Aries energy represents in the eighth house is your ability to draw good boundaries with other people, know yourself on a deep level so that you don't need to kind of be reactive, that where you can just be confident in the decisions you make, but without being reactive and without being, where you're acting quickly and you're like, well, I don't care. I don't have to include anyone in this decision. Like, well, every decision you make is going to affect other people, especially with Aries in the eighth house. So you're really having this opportunity to kind of evaluate what's some of the roots of how I relate to myself and how I value myself. And then that's going to allow you to step into a much more empowered version of how you work with other people and their intense baggage and issues, which is what the eighth house represents, and their version of how they deal with money, which is a whole nother can of worms. Um, so that's what the eclipses kind of bringing up. Laurie and I have included Pluto in these pictures, and Pluto has just moved into Aquarius, and it's in a really nice trine to the moon and sextile to the sun. So it's providing a support, and the kind of support that Pluto is providing has something to do with your daily routines, the fabric of your daily life, the things that you do to keep yourself healthy, the way that do you go and get massages? Do you eat well? Do you have support around eating better? Like what those sorts of things. Like, are you sleeping well? And then taking action on them, like being empowered to say, "Hey, I need to address this issue." So Pluto's very much playing a beautiful support role to this question around value. And it makes perfect sense to me, because it's like how you value yourself is how you take care of yourself. And that's the second and the sixth working together. And so the more that you change routines to better support yourself, the more you're like making a statement about valuing yourself, like, oh, I'm worthwhile here. I'm looking after my needs, so that I can be a better human, so that I can operate in the way I want to, so that I can feel good enough to do the things that I want to do, as I help other people with their intense baggage that the eighth house represents. So those are some of the topics to think about during this eclipse cycle.
Yeah. It's so fascinating thinking about, Pluto going into that sixth house and really providing this massive, powerful change in how a person cares for themselves, and that enabling both of these issues. I was just thinking as you were talking about it, how that ability to value yourself by caring for your body in a new way will enable you to set the boundaries that you need to set in order to, you have to be courageous to set boundaries, right? Aries is all about courage. So you need to, really be taking care of yourself in a particular way to be courageous enough to set boundaries, particularly if you come out of this sort of dependency, this old storyline dependency about what you're worth. You know, if you grow up in a way that you are totally dependent on other people in terms of your self-worth, or if you're, told from an early age that you have to be dependent on somebody else's paycheck in order to survive. Um, if you're dependent on somebody else for your own worth, for your own value, for your own money, then you are going to have a hell of a struggle being courageous enough to set boundaries, right? So Pluto going into that sixth house really activates the ability to audaciously set boundaries and audaciously release these old storylines and these old expectations of what your worth is.
Mm-hmm.
That's powerful stuff.
It
I,
is really powerful.
I like it. I
Yeah, and
really,
I just, both the second and the sixth house too are concerned with your sort of your livelihood, the things that you need to do, the routines to bring that in. So it's so during these 2 weeks between the two eclipses, between March 25th and April 8th, this is a really important time for you to evaluate, to reevaluate, what this is bringing up for you, what this video is bringing up for you that has to do with your worth. What's the bigger story here? Take advantage of this time to reflect, to call in the resources you need without feeling like you're giving yourself away, to talk to a friend if that's something that would be helpful to you, but to really think in this 2 week period, like what are those small actions that you can take that can support you in this process of shedding this old stuff, and I mean, certainly there's a whole era of people who grew up thinking they had to, women who were told that they had to marry somebody in order to be worth anything. And I can think of numerous people actually with this rising sign of the sort of baby boomer generation who grew up with exactly that message. And even in later stages of their life are figuring out how to stand their ground and to set good boundaries and to recognize their true worth. So
yeah, that's powerful stuff. It definitely is.
yeah.
So right now, we are going to take a tiny pause. Okay, back at it, Jenny. We are going into, now we're going to talk about folks with Libra rising. So if you've got Libra rising, wow, this lunar eclipse is happening right in your first house. So this is very, very personal for you. And it's interesting to think about, the whole idea of this lunar eclipse, this south node lunar eclipse being where it falls, an area where there's something that needs to be released. Some belief, some idea, some dependency that we have on an old idea or an old belief. And for you with Libra rising, it's a belief about yourself. It's some way in which you have this opinion that you have to please everybody, that you have to be dependent on some way of being that it is time to really explore and be ready to change some of that storyline. So it's very personal, very personal. I'm trying to think how else to envision this. You're releasing something about yourself. And in that releasing, you are really understanding how you are in relationship in some way, some strength that you have. I'm losing it here, Jenny. Help me out for some reason.
Well,
Coming
this is
back.
one of those ones that it's almost so simple. You're like, yep, because, with
Yeah,
Libra rising, I mean, it's the flip side of Aries rising, right? So here we
right.
are, Libra rising, and what we're looking at is self and other. I mean, this is bringing
Right.
up issues on a very basic level about how you show up and how you relate to other people. So in other words, for those of you with Libra rising, this is super powerful because you're getting an opportunity. I keep thinking this eclipse, you know, with that reddish hue, which Laurie has beautifully put up this moon here as part of our graphics. But you can think of that reddish hue as allowing you to see something different about yourself that you couldn't see before. And so this eclipse is especially powerful,
Oh,
probably the most powerful one for Libra rising, because it's going to allow you to become aware of false beliefs that you hold about yourself and who you are, and let them just be washed away, and let that be, you know, I think of it as a shedding or a cleansing, especially with Libra rising, that you're just going to release this. Yeah, you said it though, the false set of beliefs about who you are in this world, and what it's going to allow you to do, you know, when you know, and stop me when you're ready to jump back in. But what it's gonna allow you to do is be a new type of person in your relationships. It's gonna allow you to be a newly determined, the word you keep using, audacious individual in your relationships, you know, and you're not doing it at the expense of some, you know, false BS you believe about yourself. You're going to be able to do it from a much more, you know, firm, kind of balanced place, that the Libra
yeah.
represents.
There's something, people who have Libra rising really can, wherever Libra is in our charts, we have a challenge in the tendency to be trying to please everybody else with that area of our lives. So if you have that in your first house, if you have Libra rising, there is this tendency to believe that you have to show up pleasing everyone else. And it's so important at this time for you to really take advantage of this lunar eclipse to untangle that old story. Your job is not to please everybody else. I mean, you have that ability. You can walk into a room, you can be very diplomatic, you can utilize that in wonderful ways. It's not like Libra rising is a terrible thing to have, not by any means, but there is that underlying belief that is being really highlighted with this lunar eclipse of how can you tell yourself a new story? How can you really be true to yourself and not have it just about pleasing anyone else? Or, you can also, with Libra rising, you can find yourself adapting to a partner's expectation of who you show up as. So this is really about um, being audacious enough in your relationship to stand up for who you are. So there's that polarity. You've got to, show up in your relationship as the strength of Aries. People with Libra rising tend to be very attracted to Aries kind of energy in their relationships so that they can kind of rest in a more I don't I think there's a positive way I could say it, but a more dependent way on the relationship. And this is a time of really developing that balance and accepting becoming who you are on that level of personality that is really best for you and not just trying to please other people. At the same time, one of the big pieces that is supporting this change, this internal work of becoming more true to yourself, is the fact that Pluto has recently moved into your fifth house. You want to think about the profound change happening in your life regarding your creativity or your relationship with your children or your yeah, creativity and children are two of the biggest things that I would think of here, where it would show up that there's a powerful change that is being undertaken in this area. And that powerful change is really showing you, it's one of the things that's really supporting the different viewpoint that Jennie talked about, the different perspective that you can get on yourself when you see how creative you can be, when Pluto opens up those floodgates of your own internal creativity, it allows you to see what you can become, how you can show up in the world in a new way.
Mm.
So and support your audaciousness of letting your partner know that in no uncertain terms, you are going to not always be trying to please them.
Yeah. Oh, I love thinking about just, if you have Libra rising, it's like one of your jobs in life. It really implies a life direction of, you are that person bringing balance and bringing harmony, and bringing all those wonderful things that, I mean, Libras really is about that inclusivity, about bringing other people to the table, about, I mean, Libra, she's the scales, so it's Lady Justice. It's like bringing justice and balance, and that is part of what your life direction is as a Libra rising person. And with Pluto in your fifth house, I just love that, because that's saying, hey, Pluto's teaching you a new way to give love, a new way to give of yourself. And as a Libra rising person, you have a hell of a lot to give, so I just think that this is a beautiful opportunity to bring those things together as a Libra rising person. So pretty potent. Like it's really putting you on a path to a new way of sharing of yourself that does not give yourself away,
Right.
that keeps you intact. So I think it's pretty cool. We've been talking a lot about these next 2 weeks. We've got, the lunar eclipse on March 25th. The solar eclipse is April 8th. So in these 2 weeks of the waning moon here, take advantage of this time. So self-reflect, do the things that bring you pleasure. That's a good Libra rising thing. Do the things that make you feel in balance, and take those on board. Learn from those things, and aim to incorporate those things into the shift that you're going to be taking in the way you do partnerships. So yeah, take
Yeah.
those 2 weeks.
And yeah, don't take any fast actions. This is an internal process during this period of time. This is an internal process of really learning and understanding yeah, how you have kind of um not always stood up for yourself
Mhm.
appropriately. And this is a time of untangling that, where you have somehow been dependent on other people's opinions and pleasing others.
Yeah.
This is a really powerful time to strengthen who you are.
Yeah, and doing it with a hell of a lot of grace is what you have the
Yeah.
potential for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so we're going to move on now to folks who have Scorpio rising.
Okay, Scorpio rising. Interesting. This brings the this is always a funny one. This brings the lunar eclipse in your 12th house. The 12th house is, it's one of the kind of mysterious houses. It's really, in a lot of ways, Laurie and I like to talk about it, about your subconscious, like those hidden patterns that you can't see. And it's funny because this this lunar eclipse is bringing up the idea of hidden patterns that you can't see, that you need to release, so you're really going to have, I think this brings up the idea that you're going to have an opportunity to look at those subconscious patterns in a totally new way. I think that something is going to come to light that you haven't been able to see before. If you're paying attention, you're going to get an opportunity to see, I think, this hidden part of yourself that really is about beauty and joy and pleasure that's hidden away. And as a Scorpio rising person, you might think of yourself as being really intense all the time, and that you're kind of, moving things in a direction. But the Libra part of you is this lovely part that is hidden. And so you're going to get a chance to see that. Now, during this lunar eclipse, you may need to release a dependency. You may need to release this idea of, like, I don't know, a way that you give away yourself too much, that you are dependent on other people to tell you how you are.
Mm,
There's something
mm,
about your fundamental identity that you are going to have an opportunity to just say, I'm going to look at this a different way from now on. And that's, and it's an interesting process because the 12th house is just so hidden from view. But I think the meaning of the lunar eclipse is that you're going to get to be able to see something you can't normally see. And what that thing also regards has to do with the way that you will be able to move into the Aries end of the polarity here, into the Aries space, that has to do with your routines and the choices that you make that support your health. So, in other words, as you disentangle some of the stuff kind of hidden away in your subconscious, that you're going to have the potential to really take determined action in the routines and the day to day things you do that keep you healthy. It's almost like a learning that is going to allow you to see your true worth and start prioritizing your self care
Mm,
in a different way. So, what is
mm,
a part of this whole picture and what is going to play a support is that you also have Pluto charging through your charging is probably not quite the
mm.
right word, very slowly moving like on a
Mm,
on a carousel, very slowly moving through your fourth house, also adding to this picture. And what that is doing is it's kind of like altering your roots. It's transforming the very foundation of your personality and opening up new possibilities for finding, yeah, finding your foundation. And that is supporting this process. I find it's almost like I keep thinking about how Pluto is in Aquarius, which is an air sign,
mm.
Libra moon, that's also an air sign. And both of those things together giving you a little bit of objectivity, which is going to be extremely helpful in shining a light into these kind of difficult areas of life, the fourth and the 12th. So it's supporting you and empowering you to see something different and allow yourself to make some change.
It's so interesting listening to you talk about this, and this is a tricky one to think through,
It's
I think. And I'm thinking about that 12th house with this eclipse happening there. And I keep thinking, that there's a need to trust yourself.
Hmm.
I think people with Scorpio rising, if this eclipse isn't tightly tied in to something right near 5 degrees of one of the cardinal signs, it would be very easy to miss it because it is happening in such a hidden area. But I think, if you think about dependency on others in your unconscious ways of thinking, this gets pretty complicated. And
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to pull it apart. But for some reason, one of the things I thought about was, well, which is probably not very realistic actually for a Scorpio rising person. But I was thinking, maybe this is someone who has turned over their autonomy and has trusted, um, maybe they've been working with the same therapist for 20 years and they've kind
Mhm.
of given their unconscious storyline away to somebody else's way of working with it, or they go to a different psychic every other week and aren't trusting their own internal understanding of their
Mm.
internal processes. But there's some way in which you know taking back your own autonomy of your own unconscious processes is part of a process. A process here. I feel like my language is going around in circles, but maybe those of you with Scorpio rising can pull out the nugget here because there's something very important. And I think that Pluto, like you were saying, Jenny, Pluto going into that deep fourth house, that your very deepest roots of who you are, there could be some awareness that is growing out of that, some ancestral storyline or some deeply held, um, powerful, yeah, ancestral storyline that's really making you understand why you haven't trusted your own comprehension of your inner patterns.
Mm. Mhm.
It's a really powerful one with people with Scorpio rising. If anybody's got Scorpio rising that is listening to this and is having any understanding of it for themselves, please leave us a note. We would be delighted to hear something about this.
Yeah, the other thing that does really come to mind for me here too, the way you're talking about it too, Lori, like the idea, well, the idea that a Scorpio rising person may struggle with trusting themselves, because there is a thing about
Yeah.
trust and honesty and suspicion kind of all wrapped up into Scorpio. And with it being on your rising, line right there, it could very well be like some way in which you don't quite trust yourself, like you're not quite sure because, and part of that is cultural expectation and all kinds of other stuff. But let's just stop there for a second. But ultimately, what I think we're trying to articulate is that there is a powerful change afoot here that could dramatically affect your mental and physical health for hugely for the positive. That could help you kind of lift a little bit up out of what that Scorpio rising can sometimes represent and see yourself as not only this powerful person, but as a person who has a message of balance and inclusion and harmony tucked away behind the scenes.
Mhm.
But it's really where Libra is in your chart is also a place that has to do with the collective. So it's kind of where you can also impact the collective by your own choices around your own mental health,
Mm,
and that
mm.
you can have some influence here. So this is an interesting one. This is like we're already talking about internal stuff, and then we're like, oh, and then go even more internal, and then flip it on its head and be even more internal again, So that's kind of why this one's a little bit hard to articulate. But I think it is a powerful moment that also may be hidden from view, but that will support your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And that's ultimately what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
So,
And then again, the 2 weeks between the eclipses, we want to just really focus on doing our internal work. There's, you're really not going to want to take any drastic actions. Don't fire your therapist this week or whatever it is. But yeah, really spending time in inner contemplation, especially those of you with Scorpio rising. This is going to be really an important time to focus on that inner work.
all right.
Okay, so next we're going to move on to folks who have Sagittarius rising. If you've got Sagittarius rising, the lunar eclipse here is happening in your 11th house. And the 11th house, I tend to think of it as community. It's not your friends, although your friends may be part of your community. But really, the way we look at the 11th house is it's the people that support you to what your hopes and dreams are for the future. It's how you receive from the larger community. The fifth house is how you give. So, you can see the polarity here. The fifth house, how you give love. The 11th house, how you receive it. So with Libra there in the 11th house, we're thinking about release. We're thinking that there is some way in which you have gotten caught up or you have an old storyline of dependency in some manner around community. Perhaps you find that you're dependent on your partner for your community, or perhaps you have an old storyline in your head that community is a place where you have to show up in a dependent role. Whatever it is, this is a time to really see that from a different perspective and to really notice how your behaviors in that community are not necessarily what you want them to be moving forward. So thinking about your the internal conversation that has to be released. On the other end of that polarity, you've got Aries there in the fifth house, which is really, you know, giving the energy to seeing what's happening in that area that needs to be released. You've got the people with Sagittarius rising have a tremendous amount of energy to create, to give of themselves. So these two are really working together here to allow you to see what needs to be released in that area of community. What is supporting you in a really big way right now is Pluto having recently moved into Aquarius, into your third house. There's some way in which your voice, how you use your voice, how you, yeah, Pluto moving into the third house is really profoundly changing your ability to communicate. And this is really showing you, it's probably, if you think about your voice just waking up in this powerful manner, it's going to be supporting you to release your dependency in community, because you're going to want to bring that voice to the community, right? Just naturally. I want you to talk, Jennie, about the fact that they're both air signs, because I really like how you've been bringing that in, and I don't want to try to do it in a way that you can do it better.
Yeah, this is interesting to think about Sagittarius rising. But yeah, like to answer that question, what I really like about Pluto being in Aquarius and this Libra lunar eclipse being in Libra, as I just said, they're both air signs. And what air signs can bring you, can gift you with, is an ability to get space, an objectivity to kind of take a step back and witness yourself, witness your patterns, witness whatever belief it is that you seem to have about something you have to give up to be part of a community.
Hmm.
And and to kind of blow its cover, like that's not true, that's a story. There is not something that you have to totally give away about yourself to be part of a community. That's the story that needs to change. And then the Pluto, the Aquarius piece in the third house, this just kind of universalizes your voice. It just kind of allows you to speak from to the collective, to a collective place, but from a place of, those positive Aquarius things that Pluto's in, that, humanitarianism, the ability to kind of see the big picture and to want things like inclusion and justice and balance for people. So that's kind of Pluto's just really allowing you to see, oh, wait, like my voice is powerful and I have the ability to speak up in community in a way that is unique. And no, I don't have to give something away or be dependent. Like it doesn't equal, like if I speak up in the community, it doesn't equal me sort of losing myself somehow. It doesn't equal me kind of having any kind of a loss of any, I don't know. I think that that's the message here, is that you can be this powerful person in community without giving something up. I mean, I think maybe it's the idea. I know for some people, like people who are pretty introverted, it's like they don't want to be part of community because they don't want the expectation that they're going to be part of this big social group all the time. And they desire more alone time or introversion than that. So that could be one way that you might be like, oh, I don't want to be part of a community because I'm not really that social. But that's not what community is about. Community is about, putting your efforts together with other people to move things forward, to get things done. And in that process, allow that community to support you and hold you up. And that's the receiving love that Laurie, you mentioned. Those are just some of my thoughts on this kind of 11th house and how Pluto can play in.
Yeah.
But in these next 2 weeks, in between the eclipses, the March 25th lunar eclipse and the April 8th solar eclipse, use this time to reflect on, how are you in community? What is it that brings up issues? Like, where do you feel like you might be overly dependent? Or where do you feel like you have to give something up of yourself? What is the pattern to be released is really what you want to dig in. Because then when we reach that solar eclipse in Aries, you're going to have an opportunity to really use your powerful, independent, creative energy in a new way. And so you're kind of clearing it out. Take these 2 weeks to clear out whatever those habits or those false
Yeah.
beliefs that you have about yourself.
It's so great to think about the power of Pluto going into that third house, the
Mm.
powerful innovation of the Sagittarius rising's voice, that power that is being developed, and the fact that bringing that power to the 11th house really puts you in a position where it is necessary for you to question yourself around trying to please everybody else with your voice. Pluto is just changing that. It's really allowing you to, it's encouraging that release of, oh, my voice in community has to be served up as a way to please everybody. I have to be the diplomat and make everything good in community. Well, no, you don't. You got a powerful voice here, and your powerful voice can resonate diplomatically without giving yourself away.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love
Yes,
it.
good one. Yep.
Okay, so let's move on now to folks who have Capricorn rising.
Okay, so those of you with Capricorn rising, this lunar eclipse is falling in your 10th house, which is your social reputation. For most or many people, I should say, it's your profession, where you're showing up in public, is often what you do for work. And so that's where the lunar eclipse is falling. The sun is down there in your 4th house, and the 4th and the 10th house, I mean, these are powerful houses because this is like your most private internal self of the 4th house, and then your most public outward self in the 10th. And as a Capricorn rising person, you are really getting an opportunity to deeply inquire and investigate, what have you learned about what you're supposed to be doing for your profession? And can you release the story of whatever you've been told about how you're supposed to show up in public? Because you have an opportunity to really clear out any kind of false beliefs or any kind of like dependency that you have on your profession in a way that doesn't really help you. And I think the beauty of this lunar eclipse is it's going to give you an opportunity to see something in a new way. So you're going to get to see something in a new way about your profession that you would like to shift. That right now it's a way that you give up too much of yourself. Maybe you're too pleasing at your workplace, or you're too busy worrying about the diplomacy in the workplace and thinking that that's your role. And it's time to release that, because what you get to do is step into the more positive form of Libra, which is your ability to encourage interdependence in your workplace, your ability to want to include others, to make sure that everybody has a voice at the table. And that is powerful. That is a powerful thing to be able to offer up to your profession, is that ability to bring everybody to the table. So those are, essentially what you want to do is kind of get at what are the things that hold you back from that? What are the false beliefs that make you feel sort of dependent and weak in this professional area, or in your, how you show up in public. And meanwhile, what that's going to do is it's going to release that kind of Aries energy that you have down in the 4th house, to allow you to maybe stand your ground in your family of origin in a new way, or develop a new direction you want to go in as far as your most kind of internal emotional foundation. That's pretty potent too. So you're kind of clearing out that Libra stuff so that you can really step into the full positive power of Aries and be courageous and determined and a leader in how you handle your emotional foundation. So the other thing we put on this chart is Pluto. Pluto is fairly new in Aquarius. Laurie and I have made a bunch of, or no, one video about that, so check that out. But Pluto is supporting this storyline. So Pluto's sort of saying to you, hey, you know what? I'm in your 2nd house, and I'm here to help you transform how you value yourself. I'm here to help you understand how to really deeply appreciate your value, and your self-worth, and what you have to bring to the table as you think about, envision yourself as this person in your profession who can bring people to the table and bring people together. So Pluto is really playing a support role here. It's getting you to see, your self-worth at a deeper layer, and it's also going to impact your financial situation. Depending on what you have going on in your life, having Pluto in your 2nd house could be incredibly empowering on a financial level. I think about philanthropy and things like that, like Pluto being in your 2nd house, kind of bringing that type of thinking to the surface, like not that you're going to concentrate wealth for just your own benefit, but because you're going to be able to benefit a lot of other people with that inclusive mindset we've been talking about in the 10th house. So something powerful afoot here.
It's so great. I love thinking about this as you're talking. I'm thinking about somebody with Capricorn rising, and you think about Capricorn rising, you think of somebody very serious and authoritative in certain ways. And I'm thinking about, what would the dependency be around career, or the expectation that has been developed in your life. And I just was thinking about um, this polarity between the 10th and the 4th. And this could be a storyline of someone who is dependent on others for their career because their family put them into a career, or their family had an idea of what their career should be when they, as from the time they were a child, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever the storyline is, that they have kind of found themselves in their life, their career being something that was determined by somebody else, something that was an expectation that they just kind of followed. And at this time, kind of, and we don't, no matter what our circumstances are, we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and quit our job because the lunar eclipse is happening in our 10th house. But we do want to look at, how did we find ourselves here? Is this, have we ended up in this reputation or career area because of an expectation of others, or trying to please others? Or like you were talking about a lot, where are you spending your career energy trying to please those around you? So, there may be a way in which you are really rethinking what your path is. And, as many people as are watching this, there's that many stories. But you really want to think about your family and the strength that comes from that, and thinking about that line. And I love Pluto in that supporting role. Yeah, it could be money. It could be just really understanding the power that money could offer you. I love that you brought up philanthropy, because that's a perfect way to think about this. Somebody with Capricorn rising really using this empowerment of finances and their own self-worth to support, to bring support out into the world. And it could be that you want to do that and your family doesn't like the idea. Well, you can be very audacious in your family and do things in a different way.
Yeah.
So during the 2-week period between this lunar eclipse and the upcoming solar eclipse, you want to really do a deep dive on understanding what your career is, what your vocational path, what your social reputation is, and how much of that has been determined by someone else or by an old storyline that you can change. You can change, you can shift.
Hmm. Yeah, the one other piece I just want to mention really quick, I was thinking about how the 10th house also has to do with authority figures, so I think about the big boss at work, and that also just might be just an extra little piece about, I mean, obviously you have to please your boss to some degree, or you're not going to have a job. But the question really is seeking that balance. If you're in a hierarchical situation, which many of us are in workplaces, you want to think about like how you can balance that, like where you're not, where it's not people pleasing. It's like really trying to I don't know, again, fight that good fight about bringing in other voices, allowing other voices. It's so easy to kind of assume, what other people think. And I think that playing that role and noticing if part of the struggle or the thing you want to work with is around a boss.
Mm.
Those are tricky things to work out, but
Yeah.
I hear many people talk about them. So yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to folks who have Aquarius rising. So if you've got Aquarius rising, this lunar eclipse, I'm totally distracted by the fact that the North Node is not down there near the sun. Whoever
Okay.
did this forgot. There should be a little North Node down here. At any rate, let's get back. I was totally distracted by that. So
Fair enough.
this lunar eclipse is happening in the 9th house. The polarity is between the 9th and the 3rd house. So those of you with Aquarius rising, what you're looking at here is thinking about really focusing your attention and your thoughts on your worldview. What is your worldview? And worldview is kind of a big idea. What does that even mean? Well, you think about all the things people talk about the 9th house as travel and education and cultural understandings. And I don't know, I guess I already said education. Religion can be part of that. Politics can be part of that. All of these things kind of come together as our worldview, our greater understanding, the bigger picture of the world. So you want to think about that. What is your big platform worldview? And where did it come from? How did you develop it? This is something to really consider, because with Libra here, there's a suggestion that at this time you are allowed or afforded a new perspective on that and where it's been developed from for you. There's a suggestion with Libra here that in some way you've kind of taken on your worldview as a response to others. You may have developed it directly from your family of origin. You may have, be in a long-term marriage or a relationship with other people that have particular worldviews, and you've just kind of attached yours to theirs. That can happen a lot. It's like there's a way in which your worldview is set up to please other people, or to, allow yourself to diplomatically navigate the incredibly intense terrain that worldview is in today's world. But you want to really think about, where are you dependent on others? Where are you not being fully true to yourself because you're worried about other people's what they expect of you? So you really want to look at this clearly and try to untangle the past from what is really true for you right now. The sun in this equation, which is kind of shining the light, which is being occluded at the lunar eclipse, giving us a different perspective, is down there in the 3rd house. And this is more our day-to-day information that comes in for us, our what's the word I'm thinking of? Our immediate environment, the people in our immediate environment. And that, if you think about that, if the people in your immediate environment have these big Aries voices and these big Aries opinions, then it's very easy for you to see why you might show up with your worldview kind of, I'm going to please them so they're not mad at me. So they're not throwing their Aries daggers at me. But you really want to think about this and think about what adjustments need to be made in your worldview in order for you to bring your own audacious voice into the 3rd house and express your own views. There's really a way of just untangling the past from what your worldview currently is. Now, in bringing Pluto in, which we've brought into this conversation because it's such a support here at this eclipse, that Pluto has just recently moved into your first house, which is a profound change. That is such a profound change. It's really hard to even imagine the transformation of the self that is going on. And that transformation of the self, that innovation that is kind of blowing up in you, is really allowing you to see how your worldview has been developed kind of as a response to the bigger voices around you.
Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, with the ninth house representing, as you mentioned, all those experiences that lead you to develop your own philosophy or, to develop your own, critical thinking about the world at large. And one of the things I was thinking is because it's higher education, it could be that learned a certain set of things in your higher education, like, if you're someone who had that, and now you're realizing that you actually need to go back to school, maybe not a whole new thing, but maybe you need a new training because life has changed, and now you need to add another layer. So it might be that you need to shed something, some version of your training or learning that you've had in the past. It's time to shed that and bring in something new. And again, it might not be a whole nother, oh, I need to go get my master's degree or something, but it could just be that the culture has changed. And where I'm thinking about this particularly is I can think of somebody with this who does body work. And I think about, the old school of, hey, you do body work a certain way and you do the Swedish tissue massage and blah, blah, blah. And then now what's happening right now in 2024 is all this stuff coming up about somatic work and how the nervous system is being activated. So in my example, my point is, so then this, person doing body work, maybe is going back to learn more about how the nervous system responds. And we're not just talking about the physical muscles of the body anymore. Now we're talking about the nervous system. So that would be an example of having to release something that you learned a certain way and now you're incorporating it. And it's funny because the ninth house, it is an extension of your sense of self, but it's a little bit less personal than the other two areas, which would be the first and the fifth. Houses. This area is a little more like how do you fit into the bigger picture, and it's right next to your professional life too. So a little bit more of that bigger picture. But nonetheless, you've got to look at your as Laurie has said a couple times, you've got to look at the past and what is the upbringing or the training that you've received that now needs to be shed. And yeah, Pluto going through your first house, you are powerfully situated to share your point of view and to powerful effect with other people. And it's very much tied in with who you are as a person with that Pluto in the first house. Fortunately, both Pluto and the moon are in air signs. It gives you a little bit more objectivity where you can sort of step back in these next couple of weeks and really take a look at what you need to shift, really kind of do the introspection. Just take a little piece out, use the waning half of the moon cycle over these next 2 weeks to kind of analyze what you would like to shift. And again, and then you're going to move into that, new way of using your voice. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, it
Feel
really is. I love just the way you talked about it, really kind of brought to life somebody that I was thinking about with this. And the new learning with Pluto in Aquarius just going into the first house, a lot of the new learning for this person that I'm thinking of, that what you said just fits so perfectly, but a lot of the new learning is around technology. And
Yeah.
what you were talking about, like with the massage example, it's that example wasn't technology, but it's just that innovation of a whole new way of thinking, which Pluto moving into Aquarius is a whole new way of thinking. And when it's in your first house, it's like yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And the fact that that is supporting this for people with Aquarius rising, it's really beautiful. I love that.
That's a really good point though, because that's a good description of how the ninth house can be both impersonal and personal. The idea that technology's changed, and if you personally want to resist it and try to pretend it's not there, it's going to really be problematic. But if you can open to it in the way that's going to work for you, and again, it still has to work for you personally. You're still a human being that needs to make this tool work for you. So you're going to try to strike the balance of those two things, the culture changing, and then how do you want to work with it in a way that, allows your mind to stay open.
That's
That's
awesome.
really the question. So that's a good example.
That's great. Okay, let's
Cool.
move
Okay.
on to Pisces rising.
Oh, Pisces. Okay. So those of you with Pisces rising, this lunar
Oh,
eclipse
excuse
is,
me. I have to interrupt you for
oh,
1 second. Look what I did. I'm sorry, Jenny.
oh
Again,
yeah, you've been,
I'm so distracted. Somehow, whoever made this graphic really messed it up, and I cannot let you talk for even another second without putting the arrow's supposed to be here. So for all of those of you with Pisces rising, apologies. I'm sorry to you also, Jenny, for interrupting you.
yeah. So with this one, that lunar eclipse is falling in your eighth house, and eighth house it's a powerful little house. Let's see. But what I want to get at before that is that this polarity is falling in the two houses that have to do with worth, that have to do with your resources. Both the second and the eighth house have to do with this kind of nebulous almost topic of like your values and other people's values and what you're worth and what other people are worth and all of those kinds of topics. And there's definitely some merging and some crossover that happens between those two things. So let's start by focusing on what the Libra is symbolizing. So the lunar eclipse falling in your eighth house. What this is letting you do is, it's really going to require you to give a whole new set of boundaries.
Mm.
That's what it's enabling you to look at, because a lunar eclipse, if you just think for a second, when you look up at a lunar eclipse, which I hope all of you have seen because it's beautiful, it has this kind of reddish hue. And what that represents is this kind of different sort of light, almost like an infrared light, where you suddenly are going to see new things popping up. So you have this opportunity to see something new about the way that you set boundaries and the way that you end up, I don't know, kind of exhibiting some sort of dependency, like you set the boundaries you think you're supposed to set instead of really understanding what you need on a deep emotional level. So that could be one way of looking at this, but the eighth house has to do with other people's resources, other people's values, other people's baggage, and you're busy navigating that. That's what you're doing in the eighth house, is you're navigating all that other stuff of other people's. And now you're really getting an opportunity to think deeply about what you wish to see, what change you need to make in order to achieve the ends you need to achieve, which is keeping yourself intact while you're dealing with other people's stuff and striking that tricky balance where you're not giving yourself away, but you're not being closed off to what other people need you to do. So there's a real tricky thing in there. And as part of that, as you do that work, as you do that introspection, it's going to allow you to really step forwards and be a leader in the way you value yourself. Where that Aries is in the second house, it's really going to just allow you to be, yeah, to be determined, to be fearless in the way you are ready to step up and say, hey, I'm here and this is what I'm worth and these are my values. And I think there's something really lovely about that. But the reason you have to do that introspection, on the other end of it, the Libra stuff of it, is because you can't just act like you're in a vacuum and that nobody else exists. And doing the Libra work ahead of time at the lunar eclipse is going to allow you to really understand, what do other people need? How can you include other people in that process? And then you can step forward into that kind of more fearless leadership position. A little bit tricky to articulate, but this is a pretty cool one. Because meanwhile, what's happening is Pluto, that is also in this picture, is in your 12th house. Pluto has just moved into your 12th house. So that's a symbol for a tremendous amount of empowerment available from hidden sources,
Mm,
from behind the scenes, power available from you doing your deep therapeutic work in which you reckon with your own subconscious patterns. That's what Pluto's representing. Pluto's in a really nice trine and sextile position with the sun and the moon here. So Pluto's really saying, hey, yep, like you do the work on your unconscious patterns. It's going to really help you set these great boundaries with other people that aren't, excluding people, but are also supporting you. And furthermore, Pluto's going to help you really stand up and be this leader in the way that you value yourself. So it's a really nice picture. I mean, this is again one of those pictures that it's like behind the scenes, there's a lot of work being done,
mm.
but it's going to really help you have a rock solid foundation. So that's interesting. What do you have to say about it?
Well, it is interesting. And I'm thinking just about that Pluto going into that 12th house and really just empowering you to see your internal patterns in such a deep, profound way. And as that is working away, it's really supporting this process of this lunar eclipse. And, thinking about Libra in the eighth house, just on a really simple level. Okay, so where are where might you be dependent on someone else's ideas of how you navigate deep, intense relationships? And really finding a way to be true to yourself in how you navigate those deep issues. And when we talk about the deep issues with the eighth house, we can talk about everything from well, the old time astrologers that I'm always referring to always talked about the eighth house as sex, death, and taxes. And you think about that, and I mean, fun sex is down in the fifth house. The eighth house is where you really, the relationship is in development, and you all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, I'm bumping into somebody else's baggage. People carry a lot of baggage around these issues. People carry a lot of baggage around sex and sexuality. People carry a ton of baggage around death and taxes or other people's money even. These are the areas where we really have to deeply navigate other people's stuff, and that's not easy to do. And with Libra there, the tendency to let somebody else decide how you navigate that stuff, or let your old internal patterns determine how you kind of walk on eggshells. You're trying to please everybody rather than getting in there and really navigating that stuff in a way that supports you by setting boundaries and working with other people. You kind of roll over and let somebody else determine your pathway, or you're so busy pleasing other people you can't set boundaries. So this internal work of Pluto, I think, is really enabling you to have there's so much going on, so much awakening going on, that you're able to really see how those patterns have been developed and how they support you and how they don't support you, and what you really can release about your dependency on other people's ideas of how you should navigate deep, intense terrain with other people.
Yeah, and I wonder too with that, with in the eighth house there, I wonder if too that could be pressure from the people that you're in partnership with, the pressure of their hidden baggage, kind of pushing you into one, oh, if I just do this over here, then they won't get so mad about that thing, and kind of setting those boundaries accordingly, which is, I mean, unfortunately, like that is one of the negative faces of the air signs, that they can be manipulative on an intellectual level because they're trying to avoid. There's a tendency to practice avoidance with Libra here. So this is an opportunity to ask yourself about that. You know, like, am I avoiding things? Do I behave a certain way because I just don't want to deal with it when I really should set that boundary, but I just don't want to because I don't want to deal with the repercussions? And that'd be a really easy picture to have of this placement, and that this lunar eclipse is going to give you a great opportunity to take a look at that stuff. And I mean, it's understandable, you know, it's understandable to feel that way, but this is an opportunity to go, well, yeah, but that doesn't serve my greater good. That doesn't allow me to step fully forward into my self-worth, you know, with the Aries is like, this is actually compromising that. So I think those are some really important topics to think about during this time. And this is certainly kind of like subterranean work, you know? But that's what you want to direct your attention at for the next 2 weeks between these two eclipses, this lunar eclipse on the 25th here, and then the solar one on April 8th. That's
Yeah,
what you
that 2 week period of time is just such an important time to really do the inner work of figuring out, where your dependencies are and how they can be changed, what you can release in that area. It's a powerful, powerful eclipse. I'm excited about it personally.
yeah, it's great. It's a really important pivot point. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we are finished with these.
Yes. All right.
And, and this was great. This was fun, Jenny. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everybody for being here. Let me see if I can stop this. Goodbye, everyone.